Since its conception, video games have been widely controversial, like most forms of media, obviously. From the flagrantly objective criticism such as, this video game objectifies women,
Why do you even have this giant armored robot if you're just gonna hang out the front of it so everybody can see you?
and the ludicrous ones like, this first-person shooter conditioned my son to worship Satan and become the Antichrist, there hasn't been a single developer that hasn't met some sort of public backlash from a societal standpoint on something they created. Again, like most forms of media. But unlike most, like with photography or movies or graphic novels, the criticism never really seemed to die down for video games. Even people who enjoy them as part of their lifestyle or career are highly critical and equally skeptical of the industry, the community, and the content that both of them put out. But even with so many participants engaging through a critical lens, the gaming industry has still risen to be one of the most successful and profitable markets. The general consensus, if you asked any group of competent, somewhat self-aware human beings, would be that video games have only recently been inclusive to women, queers, and other marginalized groups, and two, most video gaming communities are unapologetically get a rap for being sexist, toxic, and for the aforementioned groups, wholly unwelcoming. And I can be a testament to that. If I had $1 every time I got called a nigger in the middle of a match of League of Legends, I'd have enough money to buy an actual game where someone else would call me another slur in it. I imagine if you're a woman, or even maybe a queer woman of color, it gets a lot worse. So why play? To me, it's fun, and it lets me vicariously live out all sorts of crazy fantasies and wild adventures and stories, and the people that I met playing games have become like really long-term friends over more than just screens. But that's because I'm a dude. At best, and from second-hand experience, women gamers are treated like some kind of rare exotic unicorn that lonely men are often enchanted by and infatuated with. The amount of times I've seen a girl unwantedly advanced upon in the middle of a game of whatever just because she decided to go on voice chat and say whatever is innumerable. At worst, well, you can imagine how bad it can get. And if you can't, we'll get to that later. But if we take out the possible sense of community and belonging and further remove any form of representation in these games, why the hell do girls make up almost half of the playing population? And I know the first thought to that is, well, how many of them are counting like, Candy Crush and other phone games? So if you decide to just exclude that entirely and do it by genre, women make up about 1/3 of all of the online role-playing games, MMOs, things like that. And with games like Overwatch, it's like almost 1/5. But are the video games just fun? Does it make up for the consistent and conscious misrepresentation and sexism from creators and players alike? Or are these problems just dated, non-existent, and not as pervasive as they seem? Let's talk about that. So from the beginning of gaming, video games weren't always windows into this whole other world. Because you had shit like Pong, it's just like 2 sticks hitting a dot across the screen. And even 10 years after that, with games like Pitfall, it's still barely recognizable as anything. A lot of it was just left up to imagination. So it's weird because even before you have video games actively representing like big burly dudes running around shooting stuff and killing demons, it's like video games are still seen as a boy thing. So in 1983, little Timmy gets his new fucking Nintendo Entertainment System for Christmas, and little Susie gets stuck with playing, possibly like gets a broom for Christmas. It's wild. And it's a prejudice society still holds today because that computers, computer science, and all that really cool tech stuff just isn't and never really was for girls. So you can imagine the disparity and separation between girls and video games only increasing when you start to get these more representative, like stereotypical games with actual graphics and shit. That wasn't always the case from the start though. Only 3 years after little Timmy hypothetically gets this shiny new NES do we get like the first and probably the most important female protagonist in video games. I'm talking about Samus Aran. Stopping the galaxy from taking over by parasitic aliens clad in futuristic power armor throughout the entire game, it was quite a shock to almost everyone who beat the game to find out that once the day is saved and Samus can take off their titanic suit of cybernetic armor, they're met with this canonically 6-foot-tall badass woman. In all 16 bits of glory. If quite a shock sounds like I'm downplaying it, I'm not. It was a shock, but it was a pleasant one that the critics and players kind of taken aback by, but not in a bad way. So if it was so well received, why was the next big break for a female protagonist 10 years later? And why was she so controversial? And yes, I'm talking about Lara Croft from Tomb Raider. I think it's unanimous Samus was like well received, and I dare say a strong independent female character by today and 1986's standards. But it was a decade later that we see another female protagonist, and this time she's scantily clad and possibly figured, vulnerable, and meant to empower girl players. But it's clear that with all the official marketing, it's flagrantly peddling to these young men through eroticism. But it's not that simple, cut and dry. So let me show you a big inspiration for this project. And I'm showing you a picture because I don't have the actual book. I ordered it online. It was like an ebook thing. But the book, From Barbie to Mortal Kombat, is a pretty cool book about women's representation and interactivity in gaming. Justine Cassell and Henry Jenkins bring up ideas from Carol Clover, who's a film professor, author, all that good stuff. And they talk about this final girl trope, prevalent in horror flicks where the last potential victim tasked to face the murderer, the monster, or whatever tends to be some kind of androgynous, tomboyish girl with an equally gender-neutral name sometimes, and appearance, that throughout all the movie may be appealing to the male audience but never outwardly sexual. And why? Clover suggests this, and let me just read the quote. In other words, Clover's analysis might suggest that Lara Croft, the digital equivalent of the final girl, exists not to empower women but to allow men to experiment with the experience of being disempowered. Interestingly, Clover argued that the androgynous persona of 1980s slasher heroines, including tomboy traits and gender-neutral names in many cases, were a key factor in enabling male fans to overcome their resistance to transgender identification, while the success of Tomb Raider has been linked to the exaggeration of Lara Croft's feminine characteristics. The conclusion for that topic at the end of the chapter is that the demand that the male gaze created for a disenfranchised female protagonist wasn't so much to appeal to like a sexual gaze, but more of a longing gaze, saying that girls have always enjoyed greater freedom than boys to engage in transgender play. Tomboys carry far less stigma in our culture than sissies do. This ability to cross gender boundaries may be related to the fact that girls have had fewer choices. There are more games and activities that feature boys or cater to their playstyles. So a little bit of dated language, this was like late 90s, but this revelation kind of changed my perspective really early into working on this project, and honestly I wasn't expecting to answer part of the main question so early. So the answer to that is, why do girls play? Well, we know why some of them play, particularly potential or questioning trans women, and why they play. But there are a million different types of women of color, queer women, and just because trans women have some kind of outlet for identification and representation in video games, that doesn't rule out all the other things that entail with it, like the harassment and transphobic reactions on online communities that they face from people in that community. In terms of representation, there's still like so few well-written, well-representative female characters in games, and I'm not even talking about protagonists anymore. I'm talking about side characters, supporting characters, princesses, playable characters that aren't exactly the main hero, and they're all riddled with these horrid tropes. So that still doesn't really answer the question, why do other girls still play video games? So unlike every single male researcher on the planet, I decided the best thing that I could possibly do is to actually ask a woman. So I asked my sister, person that was responsible for why there's no consoles allowed in the house, because she would whoop my ass so bad in Crash Bandicoot Racing that I don't know, my parents were just not really okay with me throwing temper tantrums all the time. She's been playing video games longer than I have, and I figured since she has a lot of hours in a lot of video games, she considers it something close to her identity, and has spent even more time streaming than me or a lot of other people that I know. I figured she would probably be a perfect person to ask. Also, she's probably 20 feet away right now, so it's probably really easy to record too. Maybe a touchy subject. Tell me a little bit about your experience on Twitch.
Oh geez. I would say what held me back up until when I did start streaming was the stereotypes, because it's I want to be I probably shouldn't be wearing this while I'm streaming. Well, trying to talk about streaming. But I wanted to stream, but I wanted to be just a person streaming who happens to be a girl. But most of my guys' friends were like, you can stream and make a ton of money because people just want to see a pretty girl play. I didn't actually make any money streaming. Every other female gamer I see who's playing is tits, and they're bad at the game, and they're just there for the money. And I'm just somebody was you just kind of angrily stare at your computer and you don't really say anything, you don't interact with your fans. And I'm just really concentrated in this game. And my biggest thing was I've been a gamer for since I was 8 or so. Probably since I was 7, so almost 20 years? Wow, that's a lot. I was always a gamer. And then I suddenly had a transformation and became very attractive, and suddenly that made me inept at playing video games, and I could no longer play video games because I was just a girl trying to be edgy and different. There's a difference between somebody saying you're bad, you suck at the game, kill yourself, which is always a popular way of, shit-talking people, versus somebody physically attacking me and my character and everything about me because they found out stuff. They were sitting in my stream for maybe a couple of weeks. They heard about my day or my job, or and they just used it against me. And then it's like, you know, just a whole bunch of the racial comments, the sexist comments, like really mean, horrible comments about my parents, my skill, my, like, everything. Like, pick any, like, idea or just, like, a topic. Like, they had horrible things to just spam on me. Like, I noticed that, like, I would watch other streams. Guys don't have that kind of energy invested into other guys. It pisses them off when a woman, and then she's pretty, is doing that. And they're just like, I suck at this game. She's doing good. She's having a good time. And it just, it pisses them off. And it's just like such a different level of viciousness. Like, I've watched my friends stream. I've been, like, you know, on random people's streams. They never deal with that kind of, like, it's just vitriolic where they're just like, they're frothing at the mouth. They are very upset. The last time I streamed, I got doxxed, and that's when I stopped. Because somebody, like, found out my first and last name, my phone number, my, you know, where I worked and everything. They found my LinkedIn, and they're just posting that in the chat. And I'm like, this person knows exactly where I am. And this person could just have me swatted at any time. And that's not really fun. It just wasn't a really fun, welcoming environment. So it's like, it's not really, like, fun and welcoming. I'm in here not because it's like, you know, it's a fun, welcoming environment that makes me feel like I'm at home. I've just always been a gamer. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Another thing that kind of resonated with me that she was talking about, like, you know, it's not very fun and welcoming. That's, like, two words that came up a lot. But she was just kind of talking about, like, it, because it's already been her identity, that's kind of why she's into it. She said if she, like, came into it at the age she is now and was trying to get into this community, she definitely probably wouldn't have the same amount of, like, tenacity that she does now. And I kind of get that, but there's still just, like, so many questions unanswered. Like, I feel like we barely even, like, scratched the surface. Like, there's still so many other things that we didn't really even talk about, like journalism, modding communities, actual, like, women in developing positions. But there's just, I've kind of just been doing this part as I'm working on the video, and we're kind of getting close to, like, our limit. Like, considering how big this market is, I don't really think that I could have sat here and summed up everything that I want to in, like, a 13-minute video for class. I know the whole point of this wasn't really just to, like, you know, answer these questions and just, like, I feel like it was more about just, like, actually getting the interest in the things, and I'm really interested in this now. And this is the first time in a while that I really got to, like, you know, like, work my production muscles or something, and, like, actually make a video like this. And I feel like maybe I just want to get involved in stuff like this more, like, maybe just, like, learn more about, like, people in this community and how I can help with it. So if I was gonna ask for the 15th time again, why play? I feel like the answer to that would probably be not that, I mean, I said before that it can't just be because it's fun, but I think the most important thing about it is not that it's fun, but if it's something you enjoy, you really don't want to have someone taking that away from you. And I feel like that's kind of, at least if I had to guess, the driving force for a lot of us. But for now, I think that's probably the best answer that we're gonna get for now.